Welcome to Skin of Color Savvy, the art and science of treating patients of color, the official podcast of the Skin of Color Society, hosted by Skin of Color Society leaders and produced by HCPLive. I'm Dr. Mona Shahriari, an associate clinical professor of dermatology at Yale University, and today I'll be hosting this Savvy Stories conversation focused on a topic that reflects both urgency and optimism for our field. Advancing skin health equity. Let's make 2026 a pivotal year. And I'm really privileged to be joined by two incredibly extraordinary leaders in dermatology, Dr. Nada Elbuluk and Dr. Susan Taylor. Would you both introduce yourselves to the audience?
Sure, I'll go first. So my name's Dr. Nada Elbuluk, and I'm a professor of clinical dermatology at the University of Southern California. I also lead our Skin of Color and Pigmentary Disorders program and our Culture and Engagement program. It's a pleasure to be here today.
And I'm Dr. Susan Taylor. I'm the Bernett Johnson Endowed Professor of Dermatology at the University of Pennsylvania. In my department, I'm also Vice Chair for Academic Excellence and Community Service.
And I appreciate the introductions, but I'm sure our audience does not need an introduction to the two of you because of everything you guys have accomplished in the field. So I'm truly grateful. But let's just dive right in. So we chose the phrase skin health equity intentionally because this goes beyond just isolated diagnoses or cosmetic considerations. It's about outcomes, access, education, and trust. So Dr. Taylor, I'll start with you. From your perspective as a founder and longtime leader in this space, why does this moment feel different from the past?
Well, I think this time is a little bit different from the past because we are making so many advances and strides. When we think about diseases that were previously neglected, I think about hidradenitis suppurativa disproportionately affects women of African descent, for example. We finally have some therapeutic tools where we did not in the past. Look at atopic dermatitis, also disproportionately affecting patients with skin of color. So I think we now have cutting edge and effective as well as safe therapies. In addition, we have made huge strides in educating our colleagues regarding skin of color dermatology. I think about the clinical image collection of the American Academy of Dermatology, for example. I think about the textbooks that have been published. So on several different fronts, we have made tangible gains and differences.
And I think it's interesting because in the past, we used to talk about these disparities in hallways, but now it's on social media. It's in the literature. Industry's actually taking notice. So it's really moved from we actually care to prove that you care. Show us what you're doing differently in the field. Dr. Elbuluk, just as someone who's been deeply involved in education, research, what signals tell you that the field may be ready to pivot?
Well, I think to your point, we're starting to see change, right? It used to just be talk, and now there's accountability. And if you're not doing it, people are asking. And so I think now, we see companies both on the industry and cosmeceutical side, we see journals, we see conferences, all of them making this a priority, right? They're thinking about health equity. They're thinking about what they are doing in that space to be cognizant and make a difference. And so I think that sort of level of accountability is different from before. I think before people could get away with saying, well, it was a limitation or we weren't able to, but now people are expecting it, so which is great.
Well, and I also think to some degree with the US population continuing to diversify, it's turning into a patient safety issue if we can't treat the heterogeneity of patients that we're seeing in everyday clinical practice. So all of this conversation, I think, just makes me very excited that now is time for us to put our money where our mouth is and really do something. Now, I know that Derm has made a lot of meaningful progress in recent years, but we know there are still gaps that remain clinically, structurally, educationally, and progress matters, but only if we're honest about what still hasn't changed. So let's just talk about some of the progress that we've been encouraged by, which we touched upon already, but also where do we still need to do some work in 2026?
Well, I'd like to talk about clinical trials. I know that there are many efforts, specifically by the Skin of Color Society, to advance clinical trials and ensure that we have diverse investigators as well as diverse patients. I think there are pharmaceutical companies who are very invested in this. I think about the Visible trial, which really enrolled all skin of color patients to evaluate the efficacy and tolerability of guselkumab for psoriasis, for example. And then there are other companies who are ensuring that patients enrolled are, of course, diverse and reflect our population. So this is, I think, at the beginning stage, right? We need more progress in regard to clinical trials.
Yeah, and I would add, I think there's other spaces where we're seeing progress. So when we look at our conferences, people are thinking much more about the imagery they put in their lectures, making sure that they're diverse. There's more sessions that are focused on things that may disproportionately affect patients of color. Textbooks, same way. They're more mindful, right, about the information and photos that they're putting in. So I think we're seeing the changes. But to Dr. Taylor's point, the work isn't done, right? There's still more that we can do. I am glad to see that, skin of color isn't siloed all the time either as just skin of color, but it's now in all spaces where people are thinking about how do I make sure that the work that I'm doing is balanced and representative.
Yeah, and I think it kind of represents a shift from we're just not showing things in PowerPoints. We're trying to actually give practical advice. What do you do in clinical practice? And I think throughout our conversation today, we'll go through some action items of what individuals can actually do on a grassroots level to really improve the equity of the patients that they're seeing in everyday practice. So I'm going to use that to pivot toward just research, equity, and representation that Dr. Taylor touched upon. But research doesn't just generate data. It's going to represent the standards of care that we hold near and dear. But representation in clinical trials and amongst investigators has continued to be a central issue. So how do we ensure that research equity continues to advance? And what do clinicians, institutions, and an industry really need to do to help this conversation?
Yeah, I think probably, Dr. Taylor, do you want to go ahead
No,
or?
no, you go ahead, Dr. Bullock.
I think with research, there's two main buckets, of course. There's the investigator-initiated research, and then there's, company-sponsored research. And I think on both sides, both parties need to really think about, the recruitment that they're doing, who they're studying, and making sure that whatever that disease process is, that population is representative of it. And so I think on the industry side, there have been conversations about site selection and making sure that they're picking sites where they can get more diverse representation. Thinking also about timelines. Often there's a lot of pressure, right, with the timeline of, creating drugs and R&D, but maybe slowing down that timeline where needed to make sure that we are, again, getting good representation. So I think it's really important that, in all these studies, people are very intentional in the study design, the study creation, and doing the steps that are needed to make sure that the results are what we want.
I'd like to add that there's now an effort to train dermatologists to become investigators, particularly diverse dermatologists. And that way we are increasing not only the number of investigators, but then we're able to tap into their patient populations, which in most cases is diverse. So investment in that type of education experience, I think, is also critically important, and it will help us in the future.
And
Yeah,
I'm just going to add a quick point there. Sorry, Mona, I was going to add that to that point, the Skin of Color Society actually has this wonderful program called the Diversity in Clinical Training Mentorship Program, done in partnership with the NMA. And we're thankful to have, two sponsors that help us with that. But it really is to pair junior, younger career people with more senior people who have been PIs to teach them how to do it. Because that's another limitation. Sometimes you have, people who see diverse populations, but they're just not trained on how to even become a clinical site. So I really love that, and I'm glad that we at SOCS have it, and hopefully, hope to see more of it.
I think another element at Penn, I am vice chair for academic excellence and community engagement. And when we visit the community, we do educate about certain dermatologic disorders like atopic dermatitis, dry skin, etc. But we also have with us some clinical coordinators who will talk about clinical trials and engage our community members in dialogue to understand how they feel, to perhaps dispel some of the myths they might have in regard to clinical trials. So I think those types of efforts are also very important.
I love those sorts of efforts. And I think another key piece to keep in mind is it's not so much about having a diverse population, but also understanding what are the nuances that go into the participation of someone with skin of color. Maybe their hair care practices, maybe their comorbidities, access barriers, getting to a trial site. One of the reasons I loved Visible was it not only showed us the safety and efficacy of guselkumab in a melanin-rich population, but it also showed us what are the barriers that these patients face in their psoriasis journey. Because at the end of the day, if we're not measuring what matters to these particular patients, we're measuring the wrong kind of success, so to speak.
Right.
That's
And
a great point.
Great point.
I also love the comment about just going after newer investigators, newer trial sites, because I think one challenge we've had is we go to the same sites. And if you're going to the same site, the same zip code, you're going to get the same kinds of patients. So again, Visible was able to enroll so many new sites. So I think that we're really making strides. There's work to be done, but I love that we've actually gotten to some progress in this arena.
And one other point I'll add that you brought up is thinking about the endpoints, right? So I think it's so important for us to look at the patients, as you said, and look at what clinical endpoints matter to them, right? With many of these inflammatory disorders, for example, it's not just treating the disease, but even the pigmentary sequelae from it, right? Or if it's, again, other things that add to disease burden, making sure that that patient perspective of our diverse populations is also included is really key.
Absolutely. And I know you do a lot of work on the pigmentary disorders from the podium, so that's definitely a key point we want to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So now talking about just education, training, and preparing for the dermatology patients that we serve, I know education is going to be a foundational component. And a lot of times people say, well, I'm not comfortable seeing that skin type or skin of color is not really my thing, but that's not the reality in the year 2026. So how should residency training, mentorship, and even continuing medical education evolve to prepare dermatologists to care for this population that's increasingly diverse?
I mean, I think there's a couple things to think about. One is, the APD does amazing work with working with program directors, and I think making sure that there's sort of um, organizational recommendations, right, for what standard should be happening standard across all residency programs, I think is really important. For those of us that are passionate about this, we're making sure our residents are trained, but we want it to be across the board everywhere. I think the educational materials that are used in the residency are also really important, and making sure that the textbooks that they have and any other resources provide that training, because not every program is in a place where you're going to see all populations, but we want every dermatologist to finish training ready to move anywhere in the country, right? Or world, really, and be able to treat anyone comfortably. One of the things at SOCS that we've done to kind of help in that space is our book club. And so we're really proud of that, but that's allowed us to get out textbooks that really provide additional education to skin of color to residents across the country. But I think there's multiple ways that this can be done. And I'm sure Dr. Taylor has some other thoughts to add.
Yeah. So beyond your individual residency program, many of our trainees, as well as our colleagues, go to the AAD annual meeting. They go to the SOCS meeting. They go to Innovation Academy. They go to a whole host of other programs, be they, Derm Squared, Fall or Winter Clinical. That's just ODAC. So all of these meetings have sessions on skin of color, either separate sessions or they're integrated into other sessions, right? So there are many different ways to get the skills that you need and the knowledge that you need, even beyond your residency program.
I really love the integration because I think sometimes when there's a specific skin of color session, you want to see the comparison between lighter skin tones and not. So I like when people, for example, put a picture of psoriasis up there, they show melanin-rich skin and they show lighter skin. And you can right there in real time see the difference, talk about the nuances, and then make some progress in terms of your overall understanding of it. Now I'm going to ask you guys a fun question.
Can I brag?
Yes.
So Dr. Elbuluk and I did an atlas and synopsis of skin of color dermatology. And in that atlas, we have various skin types, for a whole host of diseases right next to each other. So you can compare and contrast the clinical presentation.
I love it. This wasn't even planned. This just came up right here. Now, this is a fun question, but what is one thing you wish every resident could see 50 times before they graduate?
Oh
So for
God.
me, it would be central centrifugal cicatricial alopecia, CCCA. I want them to see it 50 times and they want them to understand the treatments.
That's a good one. I don't think I can pick one disease, but what I will say that I always push my residents, because as you mentioned, I'm in the pigmentary world, right? Is that I always say, not all brown spots are the same thing. You can't think of them all equally. And so every time they just call something hyperpigmented and want to lump it into one umbrella, I really push them to think about differentials and all the wide range of possibilities there are. So if there's one thing I wish they could really understand is just deepening their understanding of the wide spectrum of disorders of dyspigmentation and not kind of quickly thinking everything is PIH, right? So that would be my one
That's a
thing.
good one.
I love that. Yeah. Because I can't tell you how many people come to me like, yeah, I just have these dark marks on me, and it could actually be a condition.
Absolutely.
So now skin health equity doesn't stop at the diagnosis. It can extend to policy, access, systemic change. So what role does advocacy or public policy, particular some of the activities that the Skin of Color Society can do, play in translating that awareness into lasting change?
Yeah,
Well,
oh, please,
go
Dr.
ahead. No. Go ahead, Dr. Bullock.
I was just going to say, I think advocacy is essential. And I'm so thankful to all of the organizations in dermatology that are doing advocacy. If you look at most of them, almost all of them have an advocacy arm or committee because we need that many individuals in all of these different spaces coming from different angles to advocate for our profession. We do have an advocacy committee at the Skin of Color Society, which we're really proud of. And obviously, our focus is related to things that impact patients of color. But I think that, it takes a village. And I think it's something where, we need to have strength in numbers and we need to come together and even partner with other societies on these advocacy efforts.
So I was going to give you a living, breathing example. So as you may know, in the military, there's been a directive that men with PFB who don't improve after a year can be discharged from the military. So the academy, in conjunction with several different professional societies, dermatology societies, have sent representatives so that we could create or do a Delphi for treatment. So we're engaged in that to give our opinion about the most effective treatments for PFB. Dr. Bullock and I are a part of this effort. The Academy has also requested a discussion with the Department of Defense because this is a disease that affects not only individuals with skin of color, but many different men, right? It's not anything that they are doing wrong. So that type of advocacy is sort of kind of living and breathing example of what we can accomplish when we work together.
And I love that it brings equity across the board. Like you said, it's not just skin of color patients, it's all men, and they should be able to be a part of the military or do
Right.
what they feel is their calling in life without having a skin disease holding them back. Now, I know sometimes innovation can actually help with some of these challenges that we face. It can close the gaps, sometimes it can widen them. And as dermatology continues to innovate, how can we ensure that new technologies like AI even can help to reduce these health disparities?
Well, I think we have to keep asking the tough questions, right? Like when new things come out, we can't just become immediate adopters. We need to look at, what are data sets, for example, that are feeding AI for dermatologic programs, making sure that there's not bias in the things that are going into things. So I think all of us as dermatologists being critical thinkers and really, being in different spaces. We all can't be in, everywhere at once. But I think if we can be asking these questions and pushing back to the companies that are creating the technology and devices, which could be great. It could help us, right? And help our patients, but making sure that they're done through a lens where there isn't bias that's created or perpetuated is going to be really important.
Dr. Bullock mentioned spaces. I think it's critically important that we be in rooms and spaces that make the decisions, decide what to investigate, decide what to invest in. So I think that's also a key for the future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more because I do think that that bias piece that comes into the equation. If you look at Google, for example, you put in the word psoriasis, and it takes a while for you to see a skin of color patient. So if we're feeding in the wrong images that are not diverse, then someone on the other side isn't going to actually see what they need to see. And for psoriasis specifically, a patient may not think that's a disease they have if their skin is not represented. That bias can actually impact thousands when it gets built into an algorithm, so to speak. So I know we are coming up to the end of our time. So I want to first thank you guys for joining me. But as we look ahead into 2026, let's talk about a couple of things that we can do, like real world activities. So is there one educational or advocacy action that you think people can do on a grassroots level that would help them make a difference? Small scale, we're talking.
I do. I mean, so I would say one clinical action is take time to think of one disease state that you just don't feel comfortable with, that you just don't know as well, you don't see as much, and take the time to learn about it. See what the newest journal articles are about it, go to a session about it, just take a proactive stance to do something different about a space that you might be uncomfortable in. And in this case, if it's anything related to skin of color, we welcome individuals to do that. But it could be about, again, anything that you're passionate about. The second thing I'd say with advocacy is join any committee or organization where you can be part of those spaces that Dr. Taylor's talking about. I think a lot of people feel that they can only make a difference at high levels of leadership where you have to be running something in order to have a say. And that's not true. I think every member of every organization, their voice matters. And so even if you are, again, just having one slice of the pie by joining one committee and really dedicating yourself to that, you're making a difference. And so whoever can help do that for us, especially in the education advocacy realm, will be doing really important work.
As dermatologists, we are all a part of a larger community, the dermatology community. And I think that if a patient comes in and you're not sure about the diagnosis, if it's a skin of color patient or not, then you can call on your colleagues. You can call on us. You can run the case by us. I don't care if you've been out a year, if you've been out 30 years, right? We're part of a community. I've never had anyone when I've reached out not take the call, not talk to me, and vice versa. I've taken all of those calls. So I want to say we're not alone. We're not isolated. We are here to serve our patients, to serve all patients. And if you're not sure, reach out.
I actually think we're privileged in dermatology that we all like to help each other and we
Yeah.
actually like each other. One thing I actually do in my clinical practice is sometimes we do like a skin of color case review once a quarter. I've looked at my own images, tried to make sure I diversify my own portfolio. So when I get on the podium, I can make sure that I'm accurately representing the patients I see. I think, though, to your point, Dr. Elbuluk, that it's not about big things. It can even be something really small, but done consistently that can still make a change. I think sometimes we're waiting to make these grand movements, and oftentimes that doesn't happen. So even the smallest shift can definitely make an impact. So do you guys have any last minute tips for our audience as they get ready to embark on 2026 with skin health equity in mind?
The thing I would say is, in terms of mindset related to skin health equity, is just knowing that the work is not done, and not just, being satisfied or stagnant with where we are. This is an ongoing process, and I think we have to just recognize that there's more to be done. Yes, we have made strides, and it's wonderful, but there's a lot more work to be done, and we really want to have as many people, with us on that journey as possible.
You know, as part of that, it's not just, Dr. Shahriari or Bullock or I who are doing this work. We all can do this work, right? In small ways, in large ways, right? And with each of us working towards this goal, I think we'll achieve it faster.
I love those final thoughts. So thank you to both Dr. Taylor, Dr. Elbuluk for sharing your insights and leadership. So skin health equity isn't aspirational anymore. It's actionable. I think that's what we've gone over. And 2026 can become a pivotal year when we stop congratulating ourselves for noticing the disparities and start making moves to actually eliminate them. To our listeners, we hope this Savvy Stories episode encouraged reflection and action. To learn more about the Skin of Color Society and its initiatives, visit skinofcolor.org. skinofcolorsociety.org. Be sure to follow Skin of Color Savvy for future conversations centered on advancing equitable dermatologic care. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.